Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research, and their experiences. So, put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to the Sociology Show podcast. This episode is another Social Science Bites takeover episode with Professor Bev Skeggs. Now, if you have not listened to the previous one with Anne Oakley, please do go back and listen to that. So these episodes were originally recorded by the Social Science Bites podcast, and you can find out more about them in a few different places. So firstly, you can visit the website, which is www.socialsciencespace.com, or you can look directly for the Social Science Bites podcast, and you can find out loads and loads of different interviews they've done with a range of different people. They've been really kind and they've allowed me to host a few of theirs. So as I said, we've had Anne Oakley already, Bev Skeggs on this one, and they've kindly agreed to let me host a few more as well. So that's the Social Science Bites podcast, and they are sponsored by Sage Publishing. So they were lucky enough to interview Professor Bev Skeggs, and Bev Skeggs is known as one of the world's foremost feminist sociologists. Her book, Formations of Class and Gender, back in the 90s, has been profoundly significant in drawing attention to the intersections between social class and gender inequality, as experienced by young working class women. And Bev Skeggs continues to write about loads of different issues to do with both feminism and social class. If you're a student, you've probably come across her work. She's a very, very famous writer. And she's talked about all different kind of platforms, including women, ethnic minorities, migrants, economic deprivation. She's talked about social media, reality TV, Facebook, sexuality, violence, all sorts of different areas. And so again, a big thank you to the Social Science Podcast for letting me host this episode. So without further ado, let's go and listen to the episode with Professor Bev Skeggs.
This is Social Science Bites with me, David Edmonds. Social Science Bites is a series of interviews with leading social scientists and is made in association with Sage Publishing. OK, ignore Facebook for a few seconds, turn away from your Twitter feed, show some willpower. You know you can do it. Now, you may be of the view that Facebook and other internet platforms are egalitarian and democratising. If so, Bev Skeggs from the London School of Economics has some research which may change your mind. Bev Skeggs, welcome to Social Science Bites.
Hi.
The topic we're talking about today is the digital economy. Now, you had a grant to study one aspect of the digital economy. Tell me about that.
Okay, we began the project to study friendships. We were interested in how new forms of technology, social media in particular, social friendship sites like Facebook, were what we called infrastructuring social relationships. So that's what we were initially interested in.
But you got diverted.
We got completely diverted when we realised we'd been collecting data, and we looked at our data. There was a lot of data on the servers because people had allowed us to scrape data off their computers when they were using them over a period of 1 to 6 months. And we realised there was matter, we called it grey matter, on our data that we couldn't understand. And when we investigated it further, we realised we thought we were scraping data from the Facebook platform, and we were registered as developers and we were able to do this. We realised that we were actually getting data off people's general browser use, which meant that Facebook was collecting data that went through the platform on people's browser use. So we thought, why is this happening?
Let's take a step back. Individuals had given you permission to examine their Facebook data, and that's how you found out that Facebook was actually trawling for all sorts of other data.
Yeah, we had installed 2 types of software and what we called Ad Monitor, all open source software, all developed with the Facebook code. And people had given us permission to put this on their browsers so we could see what they were doing when they were on the Facebook platform. We were interested in Facebook because we were interested in friendships. But it was then that we thought, well, why are we getting all this extra data? And it took us quite a while to find out, and it was Facebook literally collecting data of people's general browser use.
So if you were using Facebook and you went onto a general browser and you searched for a country, you wanted to find out about Cambodia, Facebook had all that information.
It had absolutely everything. As soon as you'd put your browser on, any browser page that has a little F on it, tiny often at the bottom, if you look at the LSE page, really tiny at the bottom, is tracking you and is picking up information on your browser use from that little F. And that little F is connecting the signals together between browser pages and the Facebook platform.
Do we know if they're still doing this?
They're doing it, and it's now legal because they were prosecuted by the Belgian government in 2014, and they used 5 computer science departments in America to do exactly what we did and prove that this is what they were doing. The Belgian government won and said they're not allowed to collect data without people's permission. Facebook appealed and won the appeal on the basis that they were registered in Ireland and Belgian government had no right to prosecute them across Europe. So now it's legal to collect all your data every time you go on your computer, phone or laptop.
They have all my browsing history. What are they using this information for?
Usually to trade you. They're experimenting with it. That's one of the key features of the Facebook platform is they're very, very good. They probably have the greatest capacity to experiment with social data to see who you're communicating with, how you're communicating with them. But basically, 90% of Facebook profit is made from advertising, selling your data to advertising companies so they can place an advert on your browser.
Sounds fine. What's the problem with that?
That you don't usually know how much you're being traded for, that it is your data. Most people think they're using Facebook to communicate with friends, and basically they're using it to reveal how much they can be sold for now and in the future, and how much their friends can be sold for, because one of the key findings was how your friendship network became absolutely key to assessing your value for trading.
The idea is that if I have wealthy friends, I'm more likely to be wealthy. If all my friends have debt, I'm more likely to be indebted. Yeah,
and that's one of the really difficult or horrible findings of our research is people were being divided, classified, stratified by both their friendship networks, but by their history, by their family, by both online and offline data, which would say how much they were worth. And what we found was that the people who did not have wealthy friends, family, or history were actually being, we called it subprime siloing, were being sold debt. So if they start being sold debt at a very early age on the basis of their families, it means that the inequalities are being consolidated at a very early age. And the real horror in this story is that they don't know this. They have no idea that they are being stratified and divided into those who are high net worth individuals and those who are sold debt.
When you say they are being sold debt, you mean they're being targeted by loan companies, by banks?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of marketing companies that target people who either have what they call low educational knowledge and they sell them poor quality education. So that's very predominant in the States. They get sold subprime universities. But they sell people or attempt to sell people subprime items, debt being the key one, and debt being massive at the moment for people as welfare states fail to look after them, that we see debt being one of the major forms of inequality that people are offered in order to survive.
Is your claim that they are being sold inappropriate debt, that this is landing them in some kind of vicious circle? Without these companies targeting them, they would somehow be better off?
If you have no money to feed your family and somebody says, have this loan, and you don't read the small print that says it's at 1,820% for the rest of your life, you'll probably do it because you need to feed your family. So I think it's targeting those who are vulnerable. It's not just targeting either, it's about that repeated stratification that renders you being subject to poverty, vulnerability and precarity continually throughout your life. It's going to be very difficult to escape.
And just to be clear, these companies don't have my individual identity. They're profiling me on the basis of all my browsing history and drawing a very accurate portrait of my life, but without knowing my name or date of birth, for example.
Yeah, so everything is being done through data signals. Every signal you send, so every browser use is a data signal that is compiled with your offline data. Usually Facebook and other companies buy this data off data brokers. So it could be government demographics, it could be all sorts of mobility data, but they'll be buying this to make a composite data profile of you, and those are the signals that get put up to auction for advertisers to buy. Now, there's no people sitting there going, oh, I'll have this one. It's actually all machine learning. The profile of you is all by algorithms, and that machine learns to experiment with those algorithms to get the best profile to sell, and then the people wanting to put an advert on your browser are also machines learning and experimenting to work out how much they want to buy you for at that particular moment in time. And everything is done in milliseconds and up to, at least 70,000 times a day. So there's a huge amount of data signal trading being made possible by machines, learning algorithms and experimenting with them as we're speaking.
Now, you paint a very negative picture of this, and clearly there are serious downsides, but there's also an upside, isn't there? I would rather be targeted with adverts that are relevant to my life. If I'm a multimillionaire, I don't want adverts on an old Ford Fiesta. I want to hear about the new Bentley.
I think the key word there was if you are a multimillionaire, because if you are just going to be targeted continually by debt products, if you are going to be siloed and considered to be only suitable for subprime property or whatever, if you're going to be targeted on the basis of your vulnerability, that is not a good positive thing that we should be even allowing to happen. You shouldn't be targeting the vulnerable. Now, okay, if you're rich, and it's interesting that there's as much surveillance of rich people as there is of those who are impoverished. The rich cannot protect themselves from data surveillance in this way, but actually there's a huge price to pay for the fact that you might get a nice car being targeted or a poor car. You've just given away practically every data signal on your life, everything you do, every time you look at your phone, every time you use your laptop, every time you turn on your computer. Is that the price worth paying for a decent car advert?
You particularly focused on Facebook. I'm assuming that all the other major internet platforms are operating in a similar way.
They're competing. Almost. The race is between Google and Facebook in terms of the amount of data that those companies hold on you. Google has your search data, which is phenomenal. Facebook has all your social data, which means it's much more cognizant, or the algorithms and the machine learning is much more cognizant of your whole profile. It also has a huge amount of your social history, who you've communicated with, how. It has semantic data, so it knows how you speak, so it can target adverts more accurately in terms of your own language. And now it's really working on things like face recognition through Instagram and visual recognition. So it's a hard one because they are in a competition to see who can build the best profiles, sell the most adverts, and they're all diversifying in various different ways. So it's not just on this, but the movement into finance is going to be big.
By that you mean we're going to start buying and selling things from our mobile phones, which will give them even more data.
Yeah, there's been a new directive, I think it's the PSD2, the European directive. There's a deregulation of banking data. so that all social media companies can have access to it if you give them permission. It's like you give them permission for everything that will be written in the code of the privacy agreements that takes even skilled lawyers months to understand and read, and then they change them all, so they have to start right from the beginning. So you have to give them permission to have your finance data, but presumably when you sign on to Facebook, you're probably giving away all your finance data, and they will have that as well as everything else, and that is going to be gold.
You're a sociologist and an ethnographer, and as you said, when you initially started this work, it was to study friendship. Did you find an effect on friendship?
We did find an effect on friendship. The software revealed how Facebook was manipulating people's attention to make sure that they looked at the adverts, the sponsored stories, more than they would look at friends. We saw how high influential friends were getting more attention on people's news feed, how adverts got more attention on news feed, and we've got a lovely slide where we can see how Facebook keeps pushing things to the top of people's news feed, adverts, and people keep ignoring it and scrolling down to try and find their friends. And what we found is that if you have a low net worth individual not very well connected with any influential friends, you're much less likely to see them on your Facebook page, even if you want to see them. You have to kind of persistently click onto them to make sure that you will get them.
So people are more likely to see my news if I am well connected, if I'm wealthy.
If you're influential and part of an influential network. Now, we assume that influential networks mean that the algorithm assumes that if they put up a sponsored story and say it's been sent from you, you will pay it more attention. I mean, what's happening, and this is what's horrifying for me as a sociologist, is just that there's this granular stratification of people happening on every form. So on their news feed, through their data trading, through what they're being targeted with, which has impacts right across their lives.
What can be done about this?
It has to be regulation. They have to be held to account. And I think this is happening more so. I mean, when we began the research in 2013, very few people knew about this. Now it's becoming much more of a public issue, which is really, really good. But they're so powerful that it's very hard to hold them to account. We need to have some really, really strict forms of regulation. And they have to come from the government. Individual privacy will never work. You cannot control your privacy settings. We had lots of people who tried blocking various different forms of Facebook advertising. It didn't work. The government has to put controls over the trading of personal data, the control of programmatic marketing, control of advertising, and targeting people as well.
The benefit is that we have these wonderful platforms that we're not forced to sign up to. Almost everybody does sign up to because they enjoy seeing people's Twitter feeds or their Facebook feeds.
I know, it reminds me of the old debates about Labour, that nobody's forced to go to work, they just choose to do it. Well, yeah, you know, you'd starve if you didn't. And it's like, yes, we've all learned to use these platforms. There's some really interesting books coming out of Google at the moment about addiction, how people feel as if they are compelled to actually use these platforms. And I think people are. They would miss out. The fear of missing out, called FOMO, you know, they would miss out if they weren't on them. But for me, it's just encroached totally into our time. I think of all those incredible historic struggles over protecting, you know, children, women and horses from going down mines and things like that, the Factory Acts, all the struggles over workers having free time. We don't have any free time anymore because we're checking Facebook and being traded as we do it.
I imagine you're used to doing very different kind of field work than this. Were there other disciplines you had to call upon for this very high-tech project?
In order to do this work, I had to work with computer scientists, software engineers, and they were amazing. But it took quite a while to learn how to communicate, because I would ask for ridiculous things and they go, you can't do that. Software doesn't work that way. So I had to enter a whole new world, but it was absolutely fascinating. And I just have so much respect for people who can do this sort of analysis. But I think it's great to put together teams where people are asking questions that might look really idiotic, but actually it gets to the heart of the issue. You know, how does advertising work on Facebook was one of mine. But we got there in the end. We found it out.
After this interview is over, how long will it take you to check your Facebook or Twitter feed?
I now keep mine off all day. I very rarely use them, and I'll check Twitter maybe once a week. I'm trying to be completely controlled. But you see, that's it. I'm having to say I am controlled. It's incredible that I now have to do that.
Bev Skeggs, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Social Science Bites is made in association with Sage Publishing. For more interviews, go to socialsciencespace.com.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for The Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.